Welcome to another edition of the ISB podcast. I'm here with Chris, who's, of course, our resident reggae boy. But today we're going to talk about all the happenings from Copa America Group B, which finished up today. And Chris, I could say it was a very bad showing overall for CONCACAF, not just the reggae boys, but a team that always seems to make the second round. Mexico was also eliminated.
Yeah, Mexico, a team in transition. They were missing a lot of the big names that you've seen in years past. Jaime Lozano still relatively early on in the job. And yeah, this is this is one potential coaching change that may result from what happened today.
Yeah, so let's just touch base on Mexico before we get into Jamaica. This is really unprecedented because they've basically made knockouts of tournaments for it seems to almost be a staple for Mexico. And of course, at the end, there was some help that in the sense that Mexico was ordered a penalty. VAR reviewed it and said no, it wasn't a penalty. Now there were instances earlier in the match where I thought Mexico should have been awarded a penalty, but regardless, they just didn't do enough in this particular match. Didn't do enough in this tournament. Aside from the goal against Jamaica, which was a wonder strike, they haven't been able to muster up any goals. So, I mean, what does this say about the CONCACAF region as a whole?
I mean, with Mexico in particular, I think you got to break it down by team, right? Like,
Okay.
we can go at each of the CONCACAF teams. Canada did fine, right? They had a coaching change, and that helped propel them into the second round. For Mexico, I think they've just been in a state of flux. It's this weird transitional period where, they just don't have the sort of names that they did in the past. And most of their players are kind of still in the domestic leagues. They're not venturing out and foraying into Europe the way that they need to. And the federation down there just seems to be very content to be, I guess, raking in the money that they would get from these tournaments. But I don't know if they're making some of the decisions that might cost them financially in the short term, but lead to more success in the long term.
Yeah, it's just I mean, obviously this is a huge fans base, and for all the Mexico fans out there, I mean, this is gonna be a huge, it's gonna be super unfortunate for them because they would have loved to see their team against Argentina, coming up in the quarterfinals. Instead, Ecuador gets through, and I got to give a shout out to Ecuador because the Ecuador fans, some of our friends from Ecuador told me after the last video we did we were very harsh on Ecuador, and today I got to congratulate Ecuador. And so I say, look, congratulations to them, and let's see how they do against Argentina. But from a CONCACAF Mexico perspective, not so great. Okay, let's talk about the other CONCACAF team from this group that didn't make it out. Obviously, Jamaica, we knew beforehand they weren't, but then they finish it off with a 3-0 loss to Venezuela.
And the morning of the game, there is, from one of the papers of record in Jamaica, an article that essentially says this is the last game for Coach Hallgrímsson. And if that indeed is the case, that's what it looked like today. This looked like a coach that just did not have, he had lost the team. And you saw it on their faces, you saw it in their body language. They, this just was the worst showing that I've seen from Jamaica in a while, and easily the worst showing that I've seen under his tenure.
Yeah, so do you think it was just a matter of they just mailed it in and the team's kind of done at this point in time?
I mean, I think it started with the roster construction, and I told you guys on the prior episode, there's no other team that you see that brought 4 keepers and 11 defenders. There's no other team that was starting 6 or 7 defensive backs during a game. Like, I know Hallgrímsson has a reputation of being a more defensive coach, but that's just not a way to go into a tournament trying to manage. Let's just hold teams to a clean sheet, and then maybe we'll find the goals here or there. It I think on paper was just a bad start, and then of course the Leon Bailey situation I think was linked to this because the rumor was Hallgrímsson was still trying to get him back into the team at some point in this tournament, in spite of the fact that he had had a party scheduled for months, like the day before the Mexico game. So the idea that you were going to have him join mid camp, I think that must have, if the rumor is true, rubbed some players the wrong way.
Yeah. I mean, look, so do you how much of this do you put on Hallgrímsson though, like of Copa America? Like how much do you actually put on him?
Look, I don't know what all the availabilities were for some of the other players, but like, is it Jamal Lowe available? He was available in Nations League. Like that. That's the type of player that maybe you needed to bring to this tournament. Again, you're starting off with 11 defenders and 4 keepers, so more than half of your roster uh, is just all defensive players, and you brought on some players. Even having the benefit of a 26-player roster, you really only brought 22, 23. So, that from the beginning, I think was a problem. Maybe if he brings a little more balanced roster, you get better results. But at the same time, I mean, it's interesting. You go read the details of that article. The high water mark of his campaign was that second leg in Canada, right? When
Yeah.
they got their first ever win on Canadian soil.
Yeah.
Apparently, he was considering leaving before that game. So even the highest point that he had in his tenure, that was apparently the breaking point that he had kind of made the decision. Maybe he's going to be out, and I mean that's around the time the suspension for Bailey is decided. He, I think, rumored to have moved out of the house and off the island, back to Iceland. He's only coming to Jamaica to do, uh, the during the international windows. So it seems maybe that he's been checked out for a while, and that might actually explain some of the very demure and stoic scenes that we see of him on the sideline, because he was a lot more animated and
Yeah.
excited, jumping up and down and pacing the sidelines early on in his tenure. And yeah, uh, that's not what we've seen as of late.
So okay, so if this is his last match, where does the team go from here? Are you happy for a change after this tournament, which is obviously not successful by any stretch of the imagination, right? So are you happy for a potential transition moving forward to World Cup qualifying?
I don't know if I'm happy about it. Because I don't know what the succession plan is, and that's sort of the problem. I see a lot of potential for backsliding. They've got Nations League coming up this fall. I those aren't necessarily easy games. You got to at Honduras, at Nicaragua. Like, I could, worst case scenario, see a situation where they get relegated from League A down to League B. And even though the games that they have, you know, next year in the qualifiers should be games that they should win, with Guatemala and British Virgin Islands, I it just seems like all the momentum that was building in a positive direction for this team kind of fell apart. And I worry that it could end up being a situation like the Reggae Girls, where you're really having to start from scratch.
Yeah. So let's finish with this. Obviously, is there anything that you want to take away? Because as I always like to do, I want to end on a high note. Like, so what can Jamaica take away, and what can Reggae Boys fans take away from this tournament, moving forward? Like, and what excites you? Let's end there.
I think some of their young players, like Lembikisa, like a Bernard, establish themselves on the back line. That's probably the one positive thing. They had good performances in Nations League as well, but yeah, there's not really much else that I'm necessarily excited for. I'm hoping those two I mentioned can be in the team for a decade moving forward, but I don't know, what it's going to look like. The only other hope is maybe they get a recruitment of a couple of the dual nationals from England that could give this team a shot in the arm, because they just desperately need it right now.
Yeah. And look, I think the best thing for this team is to get back on the field as soon as possible, in the Nations League, like you mentioned, and let's see how that goes. So, for everyone out there, you know, that's the end of the Copa America for Jamaica as well as Mexico for that matter. So Canada, the only team from CONCACAF who's through right now. Let's see what happens to the USA. But if you've been enjoying these videos, please subscribe to the
Yeah,
channel.
USA, Panama, Costa Rica.
Oh,
they still have a chance. All
yeah,
three
you
of them.
gotta say. Sorry, forget that. Forget the. I'm so distraught by the Panama US match that I gotta say that. Yeah, Panama's is yeah. So it could be Panama or the US. So that's the case. But yeah, for everyone out there, keep watching the Copa America, Vamos Copa America, and Reggae Boyz. The sun will shine again for you.